Housing plan in the wake of the newly launched Kenya Mortgage Refinancing Company. In studio with us, Joseph Rono, who is the head of finance and investments at the County Pension Fund Group, and Martin Mwangi, who is the co-founder of Belasi Developers. And before we interrupted that, Martin, Rono brings in an interesting aspect. The effectiveness of KMRC will largely be pegged on how it is managed and largely also on private player involvement. Talk to us about Belasi Developers. The cost of affordable housing that you're venturing into now, and how KMRC is likely to reduce that cost.
KMRC we are looking at, one, getting more of our customers getting access to the mortgages. One, we are looking at, I don't know how soon this will be accessible, because it's one thing starting it, and the other thing now for the customers going to the banks and accessing the mortgage, because as soon as it's made possible for most customers to access, it means more customers buying, joining affordable housing. Two, we are looking at more players coming in, because if the system is seamless, it means more people will join and more developers will come into play. And with more buyers, with more developers coming, most of the houses will be built within a very short time. We're also looking at options of creating employment, because if I have more customers, that means I'll have to put more people in our construction sites, more engineers, more professionals, and this means there is a ripple effect towards the end of the day.
The economy. But the housing crisis has largely been fueled by the fact that it's not that houses are not being built, but majority of the houses being built are being built for the higher end of the market. Out of 50,000 units in a year, 49,000 of them are built for the high end market. So Kenyans have to grapple for that 1,000 units that is remaining. How is this affordable housing plan likely to shift, real estate development from high-end market to low-end?
Belasi coming into the market, we came and looked at that market that have not been thought about. We are looking at people who are earning 100,000, less than 100,000, 200,000, the lower end of the market, because with the houses pricing at 4.5 million, and with a longer duration to pay, it means more people can now join that market. Most of our customers, I'll tell you, they're people who never thought they can own a house. But by sitting down with them, we agree and we look at their pay, look at how they make their money, and we come up with a self-financing plan, which is actually possible for them. So we make the houses affordable to most of the lower and middle income earners.
All right. And answered, it is something that Belasi has been doing even without the mortgage option, offering affordable housing. We'll be discussing how, as a private developer, you've been able to manage that. But Rono, let's get back to your initial concern. Private developers have still complained that it is quite difficult to offer affordable housing units at 500,000 shillings per unit, because other than financing, the cost of construction, the cost of materials, the lack of embracing innovative means of building houses in Kenya also contributes to that. How is that likely to change now in this market?
If you look at the strategy which has been adopted by government, one of the initial things which they are doing is that they are going to provide land for free. Remember, one of the biggest cost element why housing has become completely unaffordable is actually the cost of land. Land has become very, very expensive in this country. So they are going to provide free land, which the private developers then come and develop these units for purpose of offloading them to the government, and then eventual uptake by the interested buyers. Yeah, so I believe that one alone is going to significantly reduce the cost. And then the other thing is government is challenging the private developers to embrace technology. There are technologies where you can develop units within the shortest time possible, because remember, the conventional way of developing houses of brick and mortar really takes a bit of time, and that time costs a lot of money in terms of labor and all the other aspects. So they are basically calling upon the private sector, as they come into the affordable housing space, they need to bring on board technology which is eventually going to bring down the cost of the houses.
Right, right. Martin, as a private developer, I'm sure it is something you have thought about venturing into affordable housing. What has your experience been with the cost of construction?
The experience have been good and varied in different ways. And as Rono here have said about the cost of land, I think it's one of the key things that determines the cost of this house. So ours is to look at areas where we can get this land in a cheaper way. And if the government goes ahead to provide land where we can put up these houses, definitely the cost of land will come. The cost of houses will be very, very low.
Right.
Because land is the key thing. Again, about technology, as you talk about it, I'll say we have to start with sensitizing the buyers, because like now at 4.5 million, most people don't believe this is a house that can cost this amount of money. They want to come and see, is it the real mortar, bricks and that, because most of them are not ready for this new technology. You tell them about technology, you want to try this, all that, they may not come in.
Right.
Yeah. But when now the government sponsors this type of production, it means I'll produce the house without the buyer, give it to the government, and then the government gives it back to the end user. So this means we'll be able now to use that technology at that point, because the buyers will only come and get the final product.
Absolutely.
But as we are doing it today, we have to go through that traditional way, because that is what most people are used to, and that is what they are stuck to.
Other than the cost of land, there have been several other complaints when it comes to affordable housing by the private sector, because when it is affordable, then you find that the location it is in is not very desirable, very far from the city center, very deep in the bundus, and many are not looking for that. Other than that, issues like infrastructure, roads and lighting, how is this, what do private developers want to see from the government for them to be able to help the government achieve the affordable housing agenda?
One thing I'll say is that with the infrastructure and with the current input by the government of infrastructure, I'll tell you, there's nowhere that is far. I live about 42 kilometers from Nairobi, and it takes me around 30 minutes to connect from my house to Nairobi.
Right.
Yeah. So when the infrastructures are right, anybody can live anywhere. So all what you want from the government is now to have those access roads to where these lands are, to have electricity, to have security, to have water. Once those amenities are put in place, I'll tell you, Kitengera, some other time there were no people living in Kitengera. Syokimau and all those areas looked very far just some few years ago. But today you have people living as far as Kitengera, Isinya. We have people living all the way in Naivasha and coming to work in Nairobi every other morning. That's like 100 kilometers, just because the infrastructures are good.
Right.
So once those are done, people can live anywhere and work still in Nairobi.
All right. And even that being said, Ron, even as we wind up this conversation, many are lauding this move to launch a KMRC, but still very conflicted about the National Housing Development Fund and the 1.5% housing levy. Let's look at the affordable housing agenda in its entirety and what has been done so far. Do you have criticism of what has been done by the government so far?
Yes, maybe probably the biggest criticism on the government is the government always comes after development. If you look at what a colleague has talked about here, there are many other places where people have been able to develop their own houses. But if you look at, government comes in very late in the day. So one of the ways in which to unlock this, really the housing debacle, is that the government needs to be ahead of the development, which means once there is subdivision of land in a certain area, the government should come in to look at issues of infrastructure, that is the roads, look at issues of sewer line, and quite many other things. And if you look at some of probably the best examples where the government brought in the infrastructure and development came in. If you look at all the major bypasses which were done in this city, drive around them, and there are so many developments which have come up in a very short period of time. That tells you actually there is a quite majority of Kenyans, some of them are even in informal sector, who have the capacity to even build their own homes. But what has been lacking for a long time is the infrastructure. If the government can plan a place in advance, of course together, that's the national and the county government, they plan a place in advance, and then as private developers come in, definitely it will make it very easy. And as I said, there is nowhere where it's far. As long as the infrastructure is there, you can live in Naivasha and be working in Nairobi every morning.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Now, like
yeah.
I mentioned, statistics show that a majority of Kenyans in the formal sector earn less than 50,000 shillings per month. So mortgages have been very out of reach for them. Let's talk about the fact that KMRC now comes and serves as a guarantee, especially for those who've been pensionable for a major or a big chunk of their working life. Coming from the county pension fund, how is this likely to benefit a larger chunk of the masses?
Yeah, for us, I'll tell you, in terms of even our model, we are basically a pension fund. So we are one of the institutions who handle long-term funds, because we have people who've gotten employed, let's say at the age of 25, they still have another 35 years to work. Over their life, they'll be contributing money on a monthly basis into their pension fund. So for us now, as the managers of the pension fund, we look at how do we meet the return expectation of our savers against the investment decisions of the fund. And that is why you see pension funds are actually very big players in the market in terms of the housing. Talk of NSSF, what they've done in Embakasi. We've also done some 250 units along Langata Road. So, and you look at many other pension funds, they've actually been in this business for long. So we do it as an investment, but at the same time, you can see we're also breaching the housing requirements by the country. Probably the only challenge is because of the issue of technologies have not been there in the past. And then if you look at the kind of clientele you are trying to target, it may not be really the affordable housing, because you're also looking at the member in terms of is given you money, you have to give them a very decent return. But at least over time, technologies have evolved. So we now believe that it should be possible for us to meet our investment objective, give member the best returns, and at the same time, roll out units into the market.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
And that, of course, is in conjunction with the private sector. Martin, as we wind up, talk to us about how Kenyans and the masses can get affordable housing at 4.5 million shillings, and how this is likely to increase to be able to be affordable for most Kenyans earning in the low-end market.
When we're looking at those people who are working, especially once most people start working, they join circles, and I'll say most of our buyers benefit a lot from the chamas, from the circles that they belong to, because this is where they go and take those short-term loans. Most people benefit from the savings that they have been doing in different sectors. And once again, we look at some of the investments that people have done over time. Rand have always been a very good investment. And it's possible to come and find somebody bought a plot 5-6 years down the line. With the increase in value of that plot, by selling that plot today, he is able to come and acquire a house. Like now I have 2 or 3 customers who have sold their plots in Kitengera to come and buy a house without increasing a single coin. Just an exchange. A plot here, a plot there, combine, you have yourself a house. So the houses are really affordable, only that most people don't believe or don't think that it's possible to get a house at that price.
All right. And we'll be discussing this in a bit more detail, of course, as the conversation on affordable housing continues. Unfortunately, we're out of time, gentlemen. We'll be putting more information up on our Twitter pages on how you can access both Belasi developers and the County Pension Fund and their services. But that brings us to a short break on News Center. Even as we ask you on a Twitter poll question whether the government will realize its affordable housing plan through the newly launched Kenya Mortgage Refinance Company. To speak to us, the hashtag is KTN News Center.